The pale, worn-out slabs of the flooring spark and crackle as a darkened silhouette slogs through the busted automatic glass doors of an abandoned power plant just south of the infamous rock tunnel. The silhouette stumbles over debris and rubble, panting heavily and groaning softly as they trudge forward, as if to help the silhouetted figure find its way through the maze-like inner workings of a power plant. A light at the end of the corridor suddenly switches on with a loud ka-chunk that echoes throughout the nearby corridors. The silhouette stumbles ever closer towards the light, its breathing becoming more ragged. It places a hand on the right-hand wall to stabilize itself, hoping to regain some semblance of normal breathing back. The vision of the figure begins to blur into the darkness. The light ahead begins lowering in its foggy eyesight as it forces itself to shuffle forward, causing a build-up of static electricity to spark around the room and shatter the unused light bulbs running across the derelict ceiling. Each one shatters with a distinct pop, and the sounds of glass shards trickling down like a heavy shower ring out as they bump into each other on the way down, eventually landing on the pale flooring slabs. The figure reaches the light and shuffles into it, revealing itself to be a heavily damaged, worn-out Electabuzz, its fur frayed and darkened with bloodied scuff marks and gashes all around its body. A worrying deep cut running down diagonally left from the bottom of its right shoulder blade seeps out a small amount of fresh blood, slowly dripping further down Electabuzz's fur every handful of steps, and eventually dripping onto the ground as they inch forward and around the stretching corridors. A strong build-up of static electricity crackles around Electabuzz's body as it forces itself to keep moving forward and fight the pain of its injuries. Each step now becomes a struggle. Each breath becomes more ragged. Electabuzz once again places a hand on a wall, this time being the left, and rests for a moment. A small electrical whirring begins creeping closer from the corridor ahead of Electabuzz. Trying to listen to the sound, Electabuzz tries calming its breathing as much as it can, hoping to determine if a sound is hostile. With its vision blurry, Electabuzz closes its eyes to further detect the noise, and deems it to be an electrical whir of concern. Electabuzz stays for a moment, and waits for the sound to get closer. With the whirring getting louder and closer, a Magnemite rushes around the corner, and stops completely when it sees the state of the Electabuzz in front of it. Opening its eyes again, Electabuzz takes a look at the Magnemite and grunts loudly at it. Magnemite slowly approaches, but panic sets in as it gets a closer look at Electabuzz's injuries, and begins jolting diagonally as it continues to approach. Electabuzz takes its hand off of the wall, and tries to stand firmly, shaking and wobbling for a moment. Then, it shouts a command to Magnemite. A command to stay away and leave it alone. Magnemite ignores this out of concern, and continues its approach, furrowing its eye to show its determination to help. Electabuzz once again shouts at the Magnemite, and begins gritting its teeth out of anger. How dare this Magnemite ignore me? How dare it? The frayed and frazzled Electabuzz thinks to itself. Electabuzz begins drawing all the static electricity towards its right hand as Magnemite approaches. Sensing an attack, Magnemite tries to move lower to the ground to avoid the attack, but Electabuzz clumsily backhands the Magnemite with a weakened Thunder Punch, knocking Magnemite back a little bit. After stabilizing itself, Magnemite quickly jolts upwards and rushes Electabuzz, purposefully sticking itself between its horns. Electabuzz lets out a frightened shockwave, which Magnemite powers through. The exhausted Electabuzz slowly begins dropping to its knees, as the Magnemite begins draining the electricity from Electabuzz to knock it out so it can rest. Electabuzz's vision turns from blurry to dark as it fades into unconsciousness, as its body drops completely onto the cold, hard ground. Moments later, Magnemite removes itself from between Electabuzz's horns and uses Supersonic to call for help. Several minutes pass and a flurry of Pokémon return to help. 3 Magnetons carrying ragged sheets and pillows, a smaller Electabuzz with a bucket full of water and rags, and 3 Voltorbs waiting to carry the injured Electabuzz deeper into the abandoned power plant, where they can treat its wounds and help it to recover. The smaller Electabuzz puts down the bucket and rags and stumbles closer to the larger injured one, quietly murmuring to itself as it does so. As it closes in, the smaller Electabuzz begins to form tears in its eyes, causing its eyes to blur a little, making it stumble and fall in front of the larger Electabuzz. A little bit stunned, the young Electabuzz pushes itself off of the ground and takes a serious look at the injuries of the larger one and begins weeping. Its cries echo through the corridors and open rooms, echoing into the dark of the night as its wails reverberate off of walls and out of shattered windows. It cries out for its father, the only member of its family it has left, the injured Electabuzz. The Magnemite slowly levitates over to the crying Electabuzz and consoles it by sharing some of the electricity it has absorbed from the injured Electabuzz. The young one wipes the tears out of his eyes and takes another look at his father's injuries, then lets out a determined grunt to itself, psyching itself up to knuckle down and help his father recover. The young Electabuzz pushes himself off of the ground and turns back to the Voltorb and Magneton, then gives them an appreciative and accepting nod. Turning back, the young Electabuzz kneels down beside his father and begins wiping him down with a wet rag to remove debris and blood from his fur. Slowly going over all the gashes and bruises on its arms and chest, the young Electabuzz can tell his father has been training against rock-type Pokémon in Rock Tunnel. The bruises and gashes are similar sizes to the size of rocks used in the move Rock Throw, as well as a couple that are the size of Geodudes that have seemingly used Tackle or use themselves or each other in the Rock Throw move. Moving on to his father's back, the young Electabuzz notices the large slash on its back, probably came from a Sandshrew or Sandslash, that probably used Fury Cutter, Slash or Night Slash, maybe even Metal Claw. It must have been a critical hit and caught him off guard to cause this level of damage. It'll definitely scar for sure. Some of the other injuries may leave small scars under the fur or completely heal, but the one on its back will scar up unless they were healed properly at a Pokémon Center. These Pokémon are abandoned and lost refugees, driven out of their original homes at Rock Tunnel and the nearby surroundings. Electabuzz hunted for their pelts, Magnemite forced to produce electricity non-stop, and Voltorbs captured by Team Rocket as traps for rivaling organizations or the police who tried to interfere. Even the humans tried taking their home away from them when they cut down a small wooded area to build a Pokemon Center by Rock Tunnel. It was there where the young Electabuzz's mother was killed by a tree falling on her as it was being chopped down. These Pokemon don't trust humans because of their exploitation, destroyed homes, and wrecked families. If only Electabuzz was stronger, it might have been able to stop the humans from taking its home and its mate. That's why it trained so hard, and against such dangerous opponents. There is no way they'd go to a Pokemon Center, especially not the one they built by Rock Tunnel, the one that destroyed their life. With the help of Magnemite and the Magneton, Electabuzz is able to help its father onto some sheets, wrap him up with a pillow, and haul him onto the Voltorb. As they begin rolling him towards a large open room where he can rest and recover, the Pokemon think back to when they made the injured Electabuzz their chief. The Pokemon at the power plant were planning an uprising for a while to end their exploitation and endless exhaustion, but they didn't think they'd win until an Electabuzz and his son broke in and started causing havoc. They all battled hard, caught the workers off guard, and took over the power plant. It was thanks to Electabuzz displaying such courage and fighting spirit that they were able to force the workers to leave and make this place their new home. So they made him their leader and declared him Chief Electabuzz. Unfortunately, they also know that their numbers have still dwindled over the past year, as strong trainers have come through the area to catch electric-type Pokemon. Gone are the Pikachu and Raichu, all caught for their cuteness and popularity. Gone are the Electrodes, which Team Rocket preferred to use as living landmines. They all work so hard to train, keeping their home, and stop trainers from catching them. After reminiscing about their exhausting existence, the group reach a large open room, which appears to be the main common room that all the Pokemon staying there are allowed to relax, play, and even train in. With help from Magnemite and the Magneton again, Electabuzz is able to take his wrapped up father from the row of Voltorb and place him gently on some clean sheets with an extra pillow. A small group of Magnemite jolt over and crowd around Chief Electabuzz. The Chief's son turns to the crowding Magnemite and glares intensely at them. Their eyes soften and they lower themselves, that resembles a bow or bowed head, and they begin to slowly back up a bit. At the other side of the room, a couple of Grimer begin whispering to themselves about the situation. The young Electabuzz begins stomping over in a fury, but is stopped in his tracks by his Magnemite friend, who plops itself in front of him, lowering its eye to resemble a sad expression. Electabuzz sighs and goes back to check on his father. Chief Electabuzz's breathing is much calmer now, less ragged. He's no longer sparking with static electricity, which means he's resting and isn't pushing himself anymore. If only there was something to help with the pain when he regains consciousness. Because of the life they lead, the Pokemon here don't have many supplies. No potions, no status healers. All they have left is some berries for food and a bunch of escape ropes and empty repel cans. The Magnemite look to each other and begin a discussion by sending electrical signals to each other's magnets, hoping they can come up with more ways to help Chief Electabuzz. Some suggest risking a raid on the nearby Pokemon Center to steal supplies. One suggests luring a trainer to help, and another suggests that someone goes to forage natural remedies, such as more berries and water. With none of them reaching a suitable decision, they all droop down to the floor in a depressive slump. The Chief's son walks over to the group of Magnemite, while the Magneton help to recharge Chief Electabuzz by swapping electrical currents with him and boosting his body's ability to heal and recover. The young Electabuzz begins sharing his plan of climbing over the nearby riverbank in the morning and searching for fresh berries further upstream and collecting some water they can purify. The Magnemite look concerned for a moment as they begin jolting around with an unsure electrical tone ringing out from their magnets as they swap communications between one another. After a little bit of consideration, Electabuzz's Magnemite friend and two other Magnemite offer to go with him as bodyguards against other wild Pokemon and trainers, as there is a small stream at the top of a river where some fishermen like to gather and try to fish up rare Pokemon. The three Pokemon explain the situation to the Magneton and Voltorb, who agree to let them go out to forage in the morning. Hours pass by and the exhausted Pokemon finally get some rest, with the Voltorb patrolling the building to keep guard and the Grimer patrolling outside. One of the Magnetons stays and watches over Chief Electabuzz throughout the night, often having to shake itself to prevent itself from dozing off. The set sun begins rising and the morning begins to roll in, filling each wrecked and derelict room with a refreshing and warm sunlight. Another Magneton takes watch over the Chief, as the previous Magneton finally gets some rest by magnetically attaching itself to an upright steel girder in the corner that acts as a support beam for the room. As the morning light hits the back of the Chief's son, he shoots awake and pushes himself off of the ground so he can check on the condition of his father. After he confirms that his father is recovering, he eats a couple of old Oran berries for breakfast and further discusses the plan with the Magnemite. Later that morning, while the Magnemite gather a basket and bucket, the young Electabuzz talks to his resting father, telling him to not worry because he's going to bring back enough food and water to make him proud. With a brief farewell, they depart from the abandoned power plant. The riverbank is steep and rocky, so the Magnemite can just float up with the basket and bucket, but Electabuzz will need to scale it himself. First, he tries to scramble up, but quickly realizes there aren't any good footholds or anything to really grab onto. So, he waits for the Magnemite to take the basket and bucket to the top and come back down for him. But they find him too heavy to hoist all the way up there alone. After a little bit of discussion, they come up with a clever plan that just might work. The Magnemite will combine their magnetic fields together and create a magnetic bubble that will carry Electabuzz to the top of the riverbank. The Magnemite group around the young Electabuzz and slowly begin to revolve around him, gradually speeding up until the magnetic field around them begins lifting Electabuzz up. The hairs all over his body begin standing up as the static electricity from the magnetic field flows around him, carrying him into the air. The Magnemite begin rising, slowly and carefully carrying Electabuzz to the top of the riverbank. Once at the top, the exhausted Magnemite let go of the Chief's son, dropping him a little bit abruptly to the ground. Landing on his feet with a sharp thud, Electabuzz looks up to thank the Magnemite, but notices the darkening of the clouds in the sky. The Magnemite look up to the sky out of curiosity and begin to spark with a bright yellow light alongside Electabuzz. After a few seconds, they begin feeling completely energized, as if struck by a powerful bolt of lightning. The regal yellow sparking slowly fizzles out, and as it does so, the Magnemite start jolting and spinning around. After a few moments of jolting and spinning, the Magnemites slam into each other and begin spinning rapidly. The young Electabuzz cries out for his friend to stop, worrying that they had gone mad, were being controlled, or had been injured. He tries to approach, but they are too high for him to reach. He continues to call out to them, hoping to reach through and stop them, but a dazzling blue light begins to reflect off of the Magnemite as their spinning increases in speed. The wind picks up and a strong magnetic field pulses all around until a final burst of light hits Electabuzz's eyes. It takes a few seconds of him rubbing his eyes to see clearly again, but when he does, all three Magnemite are nowhere to be seen. Instead, a single Magneton can be seen softly levitating in front of Electabuzz. He blinks a few times, trying to make sense of the situation, and once he realizes, his face lights up as he congratulates his friends for their evolution. But he then immediately droops into a sadness, wondering if he just lost his best friend. Each eye of Magneton softens into something that resembles a smile, showing Electabuzz that his Magnemite friend is the dominant personality of the newly evolved Magneton. Electabuzz smiles once more and holds out a hand to Magneton, who immediately lowers itself and perches on his hand. The two share a brief moment of happiness, before the dark clouds looming above urge them to continue their mission. Magneton floats away for a moment to scout ahead and make sure it's safe for Electabuzz to climb down to the river and collect water. After a moment, Magneton returns and lets out a calm buzzing sound to show Electabuzz that it's safe. The young Pokemon begins climbing down the riverbank and starts collecting water from the river that they can purify with their electrical powers later on. Once this is complete, Electabuzz urges Magneton to take the water back while he forages for berries and some nuts he saw growing on one of the trees alongside the river. Magneton looks concerned for a moment, but agrees to go and bring back another bucket as well. For an hour or so, the two exchange buckets of water and baskets of berries and nuts, filling them up, returning them, and bringing back empty equipment to collect more. While Magneton returns from one of its trips back to the abandoned power plant, it meets back up with a visibly exhausted Electabuzz. Magneton can see that he's worn himself out, and convinces him that they should return to the power plant now, because they have enough. Electabuzz staggers to his feet and agrees to return. Upon reaching the top of the riverbank, a golden bolt of lightning strikes the entire power plant. In a panic, Magneton and Electabuzz rush down the riverbank and enters the building just as a rainstorm begins stabbing down from the darkened clouds in the sky. Magneton whirs and buzzes, while it and Electabuzz stomp down the complex layout of the building to get to the main room, where they can see a large crowd of Pokemon from all around the area gathered. A flock of Spearow, a few Ekans, some Venonat and Mankey, a group of Rattata and Raticate, and even a pair of Nidorino and Nidorina. All of these Pokemon seem scared and frantic. The Magneton, Voltorb and Grimer are trying their best to calm them down and keep things under control, but more thunder can be heard in the skies above. The young Electabuzz shouts loudly to get the attention of the other Pokemon, causing all the Pokemon to go silent and look at him for a moment. Then they start shouting at him, allowing all their anxieties to be heard. Electabuzz begins speaking loudly, trying to keep everyone's attention on him. His echoing voice explains that they have water and that Pokemon are free to seek shelter from the storm here as long as they can keep calm and behave. He speaks of how they are all safe here, how they've protected themselves from trainers and other strong Pokemon for around a year now, and how no thunderstorm is going to stop them. To add to this sense of protection and safety, he calls up the newly evolved Magneton to showcase its new power. It uses a strong sonic boom, which puts most of the scared Pokemon at ease, at least a little bit. After a small cheer from the other Magnemite and Magneton, the newly evolved Magneton becomes a little bit more bashful. The Magneton begins a small celebration where they twirl around in the air and exchanges jolts of electricity between each other. Meanwhile, the clouds darken further, and a sinister presence begins to fill the entire building. The winds begin whistling, which quickly turns into a howl, as rain pours through the smashed windows and layering each room with a cold, wet surface. After a moment, the chief speaks up again to tell the other Pokemon that he will go and speak with Zapdos to find out why it is so angry. The Pokemon begin chattering to themselves for a moment, and then they agree to let the chief go. The chief's son slowly stomps over to his father, trying to be brave and asks him to go with him. He wants to see Zapdos for himself and watch how his father handles the situation, as well as to protect him if necessary. Chief Electabuzz agrees instantly, as if he was expecting this, and begins walking towards the stairs, holding something unknown in his hand. The chief's son asks his father about the object he is carrying, but he tells his son not to worry about it, and to not ask about it again. Reluctantly, his son agrees as they walk up the stairs to the top floor, and eventually making their way to the roof. Once there, the two look up at the sky, which is crackling with golden lightning, and the chief cries out to the sky, calling for Zapdos to reveal itself to them and speak. The clouds in the sky churn for a moment, before the rain, wind, thunder and lightning calms down by about half, not being nearly as worrisome or dangerous. An ominous electrical current fills the air around father and son, and in a flash of electrical light, Zapdos appears before them, screeching loudly. The two take a step back, with the chief holding out an arm in front of his son. He begins to speak with Zapdos, asking it why it has become so angry. The legendary bird screeches again, and words begin to fill both father and son's mind at once. I am angry because of the humans. They pollute the skies with smoke. They capture our brethren. They struggle to understand we are not tools. I have been watching one who may make a difference. I have chosen this location to test him. The chief's son takes a couple more steps back as the chief grunts. Since the psychic link has been established by Zapdos, he decides to speak his mind inside the minds of both his son and Zapdos. This is our home. We will not leave willingly, Chief Electabuzz shouts at Zapdos, clutching the item in his hand tightly. I will not kick you out of your home without giving you another. I have watched your plight over the years and have deemed you a worthy leader of electric Pokemon. Zapdos speaks with a more regal tone inside of the minds of the Electabuzz. There is a haven for electric Pokemon on Mount Coronet in the Sinnoh region, where you can call home and lead your own group, but I must test you so you may be ready for the journey. Are you prepared? For a moment, Chief Electabuzz backs up and shouts into the sky. Zapdos watches this and screeches loudly before flapping its wings and rising into the sky. Zapdos begins flying around, gradually picking up speed while a strong pressure builds up around Chief Electabuzz. With another shout, Chief Electabuzz uses Swift to try to knock Zapdos out of the sky. Although the stars do make contact, they don't seem to affect Zapdos much. With a flap of its wings, Zapdos prepares itself for a drill peck, slowly getting to the right altitude to swoop down and hit Chief Electabuzz. Noticing Zapdos revving up its attack, Chief Electabuzz prepares for an attack of his own. The two stay still for a moment to charge up their attacks and, in a blinding flash, Zapdos swoops down to use Drill Peck. Electabuzz quickly pushes his fist forward to catch Zapdos off guard, making it swerve out of the way. Not taking any damage, Electabuzz turns around to look at Zapdos, who appears to be having a little bit of difficulty flying. Confused, the chief's son takes a closer look at Zapdos' wings and notices a chunk of ice slowly growing larger since the rain is freezing upon contact with the ice. After a moment, Zapdos shakes off the ice from the ice punch and screeches into the sky. "You have passed my test," are the words that enter the mind of Chief Electabuzz. A huge bolt of lightning from a thunder attack bursts from the clouds and hits Chief Electabuzz directly. The chief's son calls out to his father, worried for his safety. But a shifting silhouette of a chief raising his fist to the sky can be made out in the pulsating bolt of electricity. The attack finishes with a blinding light, and a burst of smoke billows up as a rainstorm begins to subside. When the young Electabuzz opens his eyes, he calls out to his father and rushes over, but stops in his tracks when his eyes adjust to the sight that lay before him. The chief lets out a loud, roaring shout that echoes throughout the building below him. The cable-like appendages on his back whip the ground, and his body sparks and crackles with a renewed yellow glow. The young Electabuzz looks closely at his father, who has now become more than any regular Electabuzz ever could, as he has evolved into an Electivire, an extremely rare sight in the Kanto region. Before his son could run up and embrace him, Zapdos turns back around to face Chief Electivire, nods, and turns his head to face his son. The two lock eyes, and the tension builds once more. Chief Electivire returns indoors, beckoning his son to follow. The two head back down to explain the situation to the other Pokémon. Those seeking refuge from the storm all depart, and the Grimer decide to leave as well. The electric Pokémon all agree to go to the Sinnoh region with the chief and his son, including Electabuzz's best friend, Magneton. They pack up their food and water they had just collected and head out. On their way out, they are met with Zapdos, looming over them to ensure they leave the area promptly. They all take one last look at what once was their home, and take a moment to reflect. The loss of family, friends, the loss of their homes, the difficulties of finding food and staying safe from poachers and trainers. The road ahead of them won't be easy, but a spark of hope still remains that they will find peace one day.